Welcome to the Leadership Drip, coffee and conversations for leaders leading the next generation. We're excited to welcome another incredible guest to the table. But before we do, could you do us a favor and hit that subscribe button? While you're at it, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. That helps these conversations reach other great leaders. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and get ready to join us at the table for another great episode of the Leadership Drip.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Leadership Drip. Jeff, it is a good day in the neighborhood.
Besides having coffee, why is it such a good day?
Well, number one, it's beautiful outside, but number two, we have a phenomenal guest on our show today.
An incredible guest.
Incredible guest. We're really excited. Actually, we're very honored to have Pastor Chris Hodges. He's the founding and senior pastor of Church of the Highlands. And since he began in 2001, Church of the Highlands has grown to have several campuses across the state of Alabama. He also co-founded ARC, which you have a lot of experience with, Jeff.
I've been connected to ARC.
And it's the Association of Related Churches, which has launched hundreds of churches across the United States. He's also founded Grow, which is specializing in training and resourcing of pastors and churches to help them break the barriers that they're facing in every single day and reach their growth potential. So, Pastor Chris, what a joy for you to be on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, welcome to the table.
Thanks so much, guys. I really look forward to it, and good to get to know you guys a little bit better. And so thank you for having me.
No problem. What an honor. So we have to ask, you're in Alabama, and I've driven through Alabama on my way to the beach. So I'm not going to say, like, I've not spent a lot of time in Alabama, but I know that it's either War Eagle or Roll Tide. And as a pastor, where do you land on that conversation?
Maybe.
Neither. So
Neither.
That's a surprise. I actually went to LSU, go Tigers. And I always say, I think it was the wisdom of God that I was neither, because it's almost a 50-50 split in the state of Alabama, maybe a little bit more toward Alabama than Auburn, maybe a little bit, but they don't like each other so much that I don't think they could have handled it if I was one or the other. So in the wisdom of God, I was neither.
That's a great win. That's a blessing, I'm sure.
And never mind. And please,
except for 2 weekends every year,
that's exactly that's right. And please forgive the pre-show insult by acknowledging the wrong team a little bit earlier. But yeah, so that's good. Yeah, your church would probably be half the size that it is now if you were one of the other fans. So
that's probably true.
So you planted Church of the Highlands, which obviously is a great church. A lot of people know about Church of the Highlands. You have spent significant amount of time investing, developing, leading, coaching, encouraging pastors through that since 2001. And obviously that is your heart, that is your passion, that is your calling. But when you launched Church of the Highlands in 2001, did you ever kind of imagine or see in advance what it is today and the impact that it has?
Yeah, not even close. I mean, not even close. And I was dreaming big. The model, though, before we planted our church was, one location. There was no such thing as the multisite.
Right.
So we were actually thinking one day we might have a 6,000 seat auditorium in one location, do a couple. And I thought that was just the biggest dream I could ever dream, And as Ephesians 3:20 says, God has this reputation of going exceedingly abundantly above the things that we can ask or even think. And that's certainly been the case. And honestly, guys, there's nobody more amazed than me, because I know me. And, and I'm not this good, I really don't think any of us are this good. And so God has definitely blessed it. And I give him all the glory.
Yeah, I love hearing great stories from leaders like yourself, especially from that perspective. And I know I was on staff at Saddleback. Rick always loved to tell a story of how he stood on top of the mountain and he just said, "Hey, Lord, I'll do anything you want. I just want to stay in one place for 40 years. Like, that was his main thing. Like, he just wanted to plant roots in a community, serve that community, and love that community. So it's really cool to see kind of, I won't say parallel stories, but similar stories for you and another great leader like Rick. And I think that's echoed across several different leaders of your caliber and of your stature, certainly. But that concept of, we had big dreams, but even those dreams were pale in comparison. So at what point did it cross over from, hey, that big dream was big, but my goodness, this could be so much more? Like,
that's a good question.
What was that like?
It wasn't me planning it. That's the surprising thing for a lot of people who study us. It looks more intentional than it was.
Yeah.
And it looks almost like we had this giant map of Alabama and thought, okay, we're going to keep putting campuses here. And probably 90% of our campuses were opportunities that came to us instead of us going to them. I always tell people I'm way more of an opportunist than I am a strategist. What I tried to do, guys, was just continually put the church and myself in a healthy place so God could bring the opportunities. Because as my friend John Maxwell says, when opportunity knocks, it's too late to prepare.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was always thinking, just what can I do to make myself healthy? What can I do to posture the church in a position of health to realize opportunities if they did come? And by the way, the two best natural ways to prepare an organization for opportunities is don't spend all the money. You have to have margins in the finances, because if an opportunity comes, and you want to buy it or do it or realize it, most people are in debt up to their eyeballs, or their budgets are reaching their limits. And then the second place is to have more leaders trained than you need. So I say have more money than you spend and more leaders than you need. So we thought just train leaders way beyond what we needed. And sure enough, God brought us all these opportunities.
So did the leadership training piece create duplication and greater reach? I mean, because it feels like if you trained everybody as a leader, you wouldn't have many followers. And I know that's not a true paradigm, but was it that you kept training and more people kept coming and God kept pouring into that way?
Exactly. And in fact, it wasn't just training them as leaders. It was, let's go ahead, and even though we have only one drum kit and only need one drummer at a time, let's still have 10 drummers. Let's be ready. Let's have more small group leaders than we currently need. And because I always felt like the net that catches the fish is the leadership structure that you've created. And so that's the first thing Jesus did. Jesus built a team. And so, so I was just in this team mindset and trying to keep the organization healthy financially. And then, of course, probably the part of our church that very few people know about that is a real big part of what happened is the prayer culture that we have. I mean, we take prayer very seriously. We have twice a year, 21 days of prayer. And I'm talking getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, thousands of people gathering at 6 o'clock in the morning to seek God. And we fast a lot. I grew up in a fasting culture in the home church that I was raised in. And so that I think has a lot to do with it as well.
I want to kind of dig in just a little bit, because I know from experience, and you probably do as well, we've been to enough conferences, we've been to enough, pastor training style events or whatever. And there's a common misconception, especially with pastors and the ones that are listening now, is back to this financial piece, right? And so the false idea is that you have to have millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in reserve in order to take the next step. But in reality, you just need to be prepared for whatever God has within your margins for what's next, right? It's always about that obedience step, not necessarily. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have; it matters what you do with what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Our first year, we didn't even know if we would have enough money to get through the first year, but we tithed, the church tithed. Right. So the first year we gave 23% to missions in our very first year. We always put some aside, and then we never budgeted based on total income. We actually even wrote it into our bylaws that a budget would be 90% of the previous year's income, so that you go into every year with margin. And now our margins are almost 40%. So, and that's not savings. That's a big misconception. Margin isn't savings. Margin is just money without a name on it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend it. So it gives you opportunities to say yes to a lot of things. So even today, when a natural disaster will happen, we don't have to take an offering. We're on the ground. We're doing those things. And we've had several of our campuses where opportunities from maybe a failed business or somebody just had to do a quick sale of something. And because we had, the cash to do it, we were able to say yes to those opportunities. So, but it started off with a very, very small amount of margin. Yeah.
That's encouraging for a guy in the first year of a church plant right here.
That was for Jeff.
Yeah, that was encouragement. That's worth the whole price of admission today. It's going to be tight that first year. That's good to know.
We had one staff member our first year.
Yeah, that's where we're at too.
I pay myself 60% of what I was making as an associate pastor at Mother Church.
There you go.
I feel that.
True stories of the church planner.
Hang in there.
So when did you talked about this dream, like 6,000 seat auditorium, and God has just kept expanding it. And how do you find now, Pastor Chris, 20 plus years into Church of the Highlands, Highlands College, all these things, to kind of keep dreaming, and it not being like, hey, we've achieved X, Y, or Z, but to keep thinking and dreaming and being creative and moving the organization and the church and really the kingdom forward?
It's a great question, and I have to give tribute to the culture I was raised in. My home church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my pastor is such a great commission-focused church and pastor. I mean, this deep love for the world. And if you really deeply love the whole world, and you know that's what's on God's heart is the whole world. God so loved the world, the whole world. He doesn't want any to perish, but all to have eternal life. Well, I mean, you if that stays in your heart, this great I call it great commission focus. Yeah. If you have true great commission focus, you're not building an organization, you're not building a church, you're not trying to get to a certain size. You're trying to, as one evangelist said, populate heaven and plunder hell. We're trying to do everything we can to see people find Christ, and I think sometimes churches and pastors lose sight of that.
Yeah,
and they do get satisfied, and I think that's what the prayer culture does. One of the disciplines that I do to keep this Great Commission stirred up in my heart is I travel to an underdeveloped nation every year just to see how people live and to see what people are going through, and to put myself in positions, to lead people personally to Christ. I always ask myself, how many people are you personally leading, not on a stage? And it keeps my passion for souls. And so honestly, it's not driven by size. It's driven by souls.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's a huge piece of it. So, so when you started Church of the Highlands in 2001, right? So from a leadership perspective, obviously you had some college education experience, you had some pastoral ministry experience. And obviously there were people who were probably pouring into you at that point. But as a young pastor, as a young leader in 2001, Church of the Highlands, what is something you kind of wish you knew then that you knew now from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, how important my relationships were going to be. And I already knew it back then, but I had no idea how much of where I am was going to be directly tied to the people that I was connected to relationally, from a mentoring standpoint, from a modeling standpoint. And thank God I have the blessing of having a father who really loves God and loved me and kissed me and prayed for me every day, and a pastor who loved God and loved me and mentored me. And I've been very fortunate. Even my wife's dad was truly my best friend in the whole world, but he was such a bigger than life kind of person. He's now with the Lord. But the things that he poured into me, his attitude, his way with people. And now I look back, that shaped me. And I always say that all of us really are the sum total of our relationships, good or bad. All of us are. And that's why the Old Testament priest, that he wore this breast piece, they call it. He hung around his neck, and it was a breast piece, but it had the names of the 12 tribes of Israel over his heart. And I always ask pastors and leaders, what names are over your heart? Are they good ones? Are they bad ones? Like, what's written on your heart? Because we are all the sum total of our relationships.
That's good. Yeah.
I think it was Pastor Wayne that said, life moves at the speed of relationships.
He was, yeah.
Right. I mean, so I think I can't tell you how many times on the show we've heard that echoed across every conversation.
Almost every episode.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Which is why nobody can name the last 10 sermons they've heard. And everybody can name 10 people that have impacted their life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So who have some of those people, you mentioned your father and your pastor, but who have been some of those coaches and mentors in your life that have made such a deep investment in you, Pastor Chris?
John Maxwell. I'm very fortunate that, he's almost like a father or really like a big brother to me. We spend a lot of time together, but I probably learned more about leadership, more about being present, more about making your life count. He's the most intentional, hardest working, most fun to be around person I've ever met in my life. And, but he's very, very intentional. That he taught me, he's written 84 books, and my favorite one is called Today Matters, and just how to make a masterpiece of every day. I've had my father-in-law, Billy Hornsby, who I never saw in the 29 years that I knew Billy, I never once saw him have a bad day, ever. Wow. Ever. He had the best attitude of any person ever. And it's people like that. I've learned from mentors like Craig Rochelle, who pastors the largest church in the nation. And I've been fortunate to have regular conversations about, tell me what you're learning. Tell me how you built this. What did you, and really, I point a lot to the success of Highlands from an organizational and systems standpoint to Life Church and to Craig. And I learned so much. But I've also, guys, I've disciplined myself to make sure I have people in my life. And I always have one church every year that I just study. I just pick a church and I'm going to learn everything there is to know about that church, because I know they're going to teach me something that we don't do that we should be doing. And once I learn it, I'm going to apply it to our church. Yeah. And I'm even going to try to perfect it so they can come learn from me how I took what I learned from them and made it better. And it's my favorite part of leadership is growing. But it all comes by being intentional in your relationship. So
unpack this studying a church. Do you go visit them? Do you get in touch with their staff? What's that look like? I mean, everybody's been watching you guys from afar, but what does it mean for you to go study a church?
Well, that's one of the things people don't know about me. They think I'm only showing them our model, but actually every year, I do just pick a church. I try to get to know the pastor. Yeah, that's what I usually can do that. I'll make several site visits. I like to attend a Sunday. I want to see how they do everything from what they put on the walls to how they check kids in to, that's a great idea. I love that. Or I even love that slogan. I love what you called that. I love what you named this. And I just dig in. I watch sermons. I'll tune in every Sunday. I always tell people I go to church on Monday, and I just go to church on Monday. I watch sermons, get my Bible out, take notes. And it's just because I have this appetite to get better. I always say, if you don't get better, you'll become a critic of those who are.
Right.
And God didn't call us to be a critic. He called us to be a disciple, to learn and grow. And I'm actually tired of the critics in the world, that are about everything. Even if I don't totally agree with them theologically or style, they still can teach me something.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that part of just a follow-up question? Is that part of the culture you've built into your team? Does your team study churches and go on site visits and have essentially field trips?
More than that, I actually require every department head. So if you're over children's ministry or student ministry or worship or whatever, every department head has to know 3 churches who do what they do better than they do it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And learn from them. I want you, and I'll facilitate the relationship. So I'll if you can't get in contact with them, I'll call their pastor, and so I broker the relationship. But every one of them are learning from churches who do what they do better than we do it, and it's just a culture we've created that actually is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Jeff and I are big fans of reverse mentoring, meaning we look to someone else who's much younger than us and we ask them questions, more than just, hey, teach us about TikTok, right? So more than just that, but still, do you have young adults or young leaders that you are listening to and saying, hey, can you teach me about this? Or what are you hearing about that? And what are some of those main conversations that are happening for you sort of in that reverse mentoring role?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you look at the history, we're 21 years old. I have intentionally staffed the church with young people, very young people. We have a very large 20-something age bracket on our staff, and that helps us to keep it fresh. And then when we're in the creative process, I intentionally put the younger people in the room. Yeah. So, because I know what I know, I don't know what I just don't know what they know. Right. So I even have my sermon material checked with them to make sure, because I'll use illustrations. I'll use illustrations from, I don't know much about pop music or, any of that kind of stuff, but inevitably I'll use an illustration. They'll go PC that nobody even knows who that person is anymore. Absolutely. And even recently when our nation was going through racial tensions, I did 15 learning sessions. I sat into 15 different sessions with young people and African-Americans and people on our staff. Just said, man, just tell me what I don't know. Talk to me. Just talk to me. I want to learn. I want to grow. And it was very insightful.
Yeah. So has this intentionally staffing young then helped Highlands stay young as a church? Because churches can age quickly.
Absolutely. And we do the same thing with our volunteers. So every year at our we call our volunteers the dream teamers. Every year at our dream team party, I ask the dream teamers who've been on the dream team a long time to move over and start coaching younger ones. So get off that camera, let a young person get on that camera, get off that guitar, let a younger person play that guitar. And we intentionally had this move over and why don't you coach now mindset, because some of those serving spots, especially when it comes to music, people will hold those so tightly. But we've created a culture of, hey, you entered in at this level. Why don't you graduate to more of a mentoring role? Why don't you lead a small group of young leaders, and you just have to be very intentional about it.
So here's a leadership question to that, because a lot of times in churches, we're great at making sacred cows out of particular ministries or particular serve functions. I'm the head usher, and so that's my role for life, right? So how have you been able to tackle or address, I know you're talking about a coaching culture. I'm sure it's not always been that way. So how, as a leader, did you approach or did you address someone who said, but I'm the head usher, or I'm the one that plays guitar on stage? Like, how have you helped them see a different perspective?
Well, it's not always easy. So you have to just build a relationship. People don't care what you know till they know that you care. So we have a very relational culture where we probably take them to lunch, have that conversation, or ask them to help us start something else. Hey, you have so much experience there. Why don't you let go of this and help me build this, because you have so much, you have so much history here, a lot. And so, yeah, you definitely have to do it. But it's the same. It happens naturally in families. My wife and I have been married 36 years now. We've stopped having kids. Okay. That's a smart thing to do when you're almost 60, right? Yeah. But we're having grandkids. Yeah. So now we're in a grandparenting mindset. So, and we just got to teach that to our other leaders that, hey, after you birth children or birth ministries, it's time to let that ministry go. We had to let our kids leave the house and have their own families. And by the grace of God, now we have eight grandchildren, and it's the best part of my life, So yeah, it's just a lot of fun. You
might have some, in the background back there somewhere hiding. You never know, right?
I hope so.
So it's an interesting statement, Pastor Chris, that we have grandkids of ministries almost. Because I feel like Rob's right that we hold very tightly in church to the thing we gave birth to. So the shifting of that, the mentality of that in churches, and especially in small church world, how could you help a leader sort of maybe in a smaller church go and not necessarily address something, but help somebody see that we have to be reproducing and not just holding tight to what we have?
You just got to model it. Honestly, I think probably the best way to do it is show them and let go of some things yourself. I've over the years, when I first started the church, I had no worship leader, and I did music my whole life, and I led the worship for the first 4 years of Church of the Highlands. I love doing it. I think when I'm leading the flow moment of worship, I think I'm really good at it, right? Yeah. But I needed to let it go. Because it needed to happen in our younger leaders. And even though it's something I deeply love, I still love to do it. I don't do it. And even now, as I approach 60 years old, I'm thinking about, one day, if the Lord's return doesn't happen in my lifetime, I will die. So far, 1 out of 1 have died. And and I want to leave something that can be sustained. There's no, so I'm trying very hard for our ministry not to be a personality based ministry, but where I'm raising up a bunch of young communicators. In fact, this next month, we're going to have a young communicators Sunday. And at every campus, we're going to have 20 different communicators all in their 20s communicate on that day. Yeah, and so I'm trying to model it so I can say, hey, look, just like I've done it, why don't you do it? So, and I think always, by the way, guys, that anything that you feel like you have a hard time getting into the life of another leader, you have to ask yourself, are you doing it? Like, for instance, man, our church doesn't worship very well. Well, do you worship very well? Are you modeling it? Because the way I say it is, you can't really create culture. You can only be it.
Right.
That's very important. Culture can't be created. You can't create a prayer culture. You have to be a prayer culture, and then it infects everyone else. So I don't ask our church members to invite people to church. I tell them the stories of the people I'm inviting.
Yeah.
And then it jumps on them. That spirit, it's like, oh, it sounds so much. I make it sound like so much fun. Then they start doing it.
Right.
We don't say, hey, you guys need to bring your friends. Hey, let me tell you about a friend I brought to church. I'm inviting to church.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. So you don't create it. You don't create culture. You have to be culture.
That's amazing.
Love that.
Well, let's shift gears just a little bit, because obviously we're on a college campus. We're producing the show from here at Lee University. But some people may know, some people may not. You have Highlands College there at the church. And so obviously we're big fans of the continuing education conversation. So tell us a little bit how God birthed that in your heart, what it is, how you serve, how it serves other churches, etc.
So my first ministry assignment, when I was 23 years old, I moved, my wife and I, 1 year married, moved to Colorado Springs to be a youth pastor. And we lived 1 mile from the gate of the Air Force Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up being asked by some of the military people that worked there, would I come and teach a religion class? It was an elective that they don't even have this elective anymore. But back then they actually could offer to the cadets a religion class. And I got infected by the academy model of learning. Mm-hmm. And the academy model isn't just classroom. It's more of a holistic approach of they go to school just like every other university. They're college students, but then in the afternoon, they're jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, their bedrooms are being inspected and they're having to walk in straight lines. So their character is being developed. And then every one of them have some type of physical regimen that they have to follow. And I had this dream that wouldn't it be great that in the Christian space, which, by the way, we need a bunch of Christian space universities. We need a bunch of them to fulfill the request of Jesus that the harvest is plentiful. It's the workers that are few. We need more workers. But we dreamed, could we create a Christian university in the academy model? So could we make it like that? And so Highlands College only accepts students that want to go into full-time ministry, just like the military academies. You don't go to the Air Force Academy to not be in the Air Force.
Right.
They're all going there for that one reason, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is specifically not for marketplace, but for full-time ministry leaders. But we built it in our 4 pillars of academic instruction, character formation, ministry training. They don't jump out of airplanes. We teach them how to do every aspect of church life. They know how to do it all by the time they graduate. In fact, they graduate with 800 hours of hands-on training in the church world. And then, of course, spiritual development. And so, anyway, we're just having the time of our lives. Again, trying to put boots on the field, man, just trying to get more people into full-time ministry.
So a question of curiosity, right? So we obviously, as a Christian campus, we have a school of religion here that serves its own purpose. It's obviously theologically deep and intense and great, biblically sound, all of those things. And I love what you're saying about the model here. What are you hearing in conversations from students who attend Highlands College? Obviously, they're coming there. They're probably slightly more biased in that direction. But as a Christian university, I'm curious because we're seeing trends. Jeff and I have talked to a lot of other people. There's so many different churches like Highlands who are launching these colleges. Mm-hmm. Jensen Franklin down the road. I mean, we could name a ton of them, right? So they're launching these colleges in their churches, and they're doing great work. But what is the conversation from the students who are attending? What are they saying as to why they chose to go to Highlands College versus a traditional 4-year program? Like, what is the separation there, you think?
First of all, we are a traditional accredited 4-year program. And so we do graduate, that type of student as well. But it's what we all know is missing in any type of training, whether it be university setting or any that matter. And that is, take me on the journey and let me do it.
Yes.
We need the application side of things. We need that I call it the Hebrew versus the Greek style. And the Greek model is really how all of our education spaces are done in America. And that's where a person lectures, people take notes, you give them a test, and they graduate. And when you graduate, your degree is in the topic, the subject that you studied. So you might have a math degree, or you might have a management. I have a business degree in management. But in the Hebrew model, you're not in a row, you're in the circle, and you don't listen to one, you ask questions. It's more of an interactive learning style, and it's way more personal. And that's why, it's Jesus' disciple model. It's the follow me as I follow Christ. Let me take you on the journey. Let me let you put your hands on it. And so all of our students at Highlands College are deployed in our 23 campuses every Sunday, and in 20 prisons for that matter, putting their hands on. So you could go to any campus this coming Sunday, and those are Highlands College students leading the worship. They're in the children's ministry. They're in the video editing suite. So it's the education plus the hands-on. It's the go to school and jump out of the airplane. You're going to give them that on the job, hands-on mentoring style training.
That's so key. Rob and I are always interacting with students here. We have I have students at our church and who have graduated, and to use a sports term, they've lacked the reps. Like they have the degree, they have some experience, they did maybe an internship or two, but there's one young man in particular. I asked him the other day, I do a Friday morning mentoring time, and I said, how many times have you preached? And he said twice, and he's applying for jobs as a youth pastor. And I'm going, you don't have the reps ready to step into that. And so I love this model of the education and the experience, not then, because sometimes it's education, then the experience. And so I think that's really valuable, especially in the young adult culture who's already engaged in that. One of the things we're seeing here, Pastor Chris, and I want to get your opinion on this, is we see a lot of kids who have a call to ministry but are not studying it. So we'll run into students all the time. They say, I have a call to worship ministry, but I'm studying the athletic training, or I'm studying this.
I'm in the nursing program. Whatever.
Yeah. And not that those aren't ministerial type places, but they have specific calls to church ministry. And I think some of the fear is the money piece, like they're not going to make money. We talked about it at the very beginning. How are you seeing that at Highlands College addressed, that not the ministry can pay or make a living, but that tension of ministry and then the marketplace of making a living?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of this is driven by God himself, because I think the generations in front of us, a lot of the evangelism is going to take place in marketplace if we can teach students how to be marketplace ministers effectively and not get, sidetracked by just having a job and raising a family, which are wonderful things to do. But a lot of times young people have a call of God on their life, and it is the money that becomes now a barrier, which is why we've built an endowment so that no student graduates with debt, none. And again, just like the military academies, they actually pay full tuition for these students. So money's not a barrier for them to go into the military. We're attempting to do the very same thing at Highlands College, because money does become a barrier. But I don't know that we've made the strong appeal to the call, like they did back in the generation that raised us up. Right. I remember altar calls like, if you want to go in the mission field, come on. And I think we need to, as leaders, need to make stronger calls to ministry. I mean, Jesus went and just started hunting down disciples, and he said, come, drop your net. Hey, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Come do this with me. And I'm ready to go there again to speak to this young generation and say, hey, look, the world needs you. You're it. Drop all of that. Let me show you. You follow me, and I'll make you a fisher of men. And of course, the Bible says they left everything and followed him. Yeah. And we're talking about them today. And what young people have to realize is there's a level of fulfillment in fulfilling the call of God on your life that no job, no money, no career path can do. And I don't know, I think we just need to preach that a little harder and make that a little.
Yeah, we recently had a conversation with a young Gen Z leader who's doing great things. His name is Luke Lefevre, and he said that Gen Z specifically, right, this is what we're focusing on primarily in our context, but Gen Z specifically really desires that more blunt against the grain truth, especially when it comes to repentance or evangelism or sin or something like, tell me what I'm doing wrong so we can get it corrected and I can follow Jesus in the freedom that I'm supposed to. But I think it also applies to this conversation you're having about calling. Like, let's call those gifts out, Ephesians chapter 4.
Yeah.
Like, let's go after them and let's help them respond in such a way as that they are able to do that with great passion, great vigor, great intelligence. But I think you're right, and we've talked about the attractional model back and forth, or whether it's good or bad or whatever. I don't think that's the larger point. I think the larger point is in our preaching, in our teaching, in our discipleship, we've got to get a lot more forthright and I want to say blunt with you know what I'm saying, like
direct.
I mean, with Gen Z, but I think they're receptive to it.
And so that's the new attractional model. Let me say it that way.
You're right.
I think we need to realize, the times we live in, and I do think this is a generation that wants it straight. Tell me straight up.
Yes.
And so we are actually we've renewed altar calls at all of our college meetings and student meetings, and we're talking missions trips and bringing them into those settings. And they're loving it. They're loving being developed as leaders and then being able to be released to lead in our church too. Yeah. And it's just a promise I make them. And then there are those that have that full-time call, and we need to do everything we can, because I'm telling you, we don't have a harvest problem.
Yeah,
right.
It's so true.
We have a worker problem.
Yes.
And
so
the other piece of that
has never been truer.
Yeah.
The other piece of that is, if we don't provide it, they're creating it on their own. Some of the most exciting things that are happening, at least on our campus, are these organic bursts of students who are saying, like, I need Jesus and I need to know him face to face, like, and I want to go after him. And like, if they're not getting it in chapel, or if they're not getting it in some other formal sort of setting, they're just creating their own spaces to go after him. And so I think as leaders, it's sort of our shepherding discipleship responsibility to help create the spaces for them to do that in a way that leads towards healthy results. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Yeah. We want to shift gears just really quickly, because if anybody knows Pastor Chris, they know he's a systems guy.
That's
like
true.
He is like the guru of church systems. So you help co-create ARC, which is Association of Related Churches, one of probably the best church planting organizations in North America, if not the world. What led to sort of launching this ministry mechanism, this church planting organization, and especially empowering with systems, because that's really what you guys do. So what started that?
Well, 21 years ago, the phone was ringing off the hook saying, how did you launch your church?
Yeah.
And I was answering every call and basically said, man, it sure would be great if we could put all these in the same room together and just say it once. And so the very first event that we ever did with ARC was called the Church Planters Roundtable, CPR. And I basically went and found 8 ingredients that made our church launch, not our church, but the launch of our church successful. Like, what does it require to have a successful launch? And honestly, to answer your question, it was the demand. That's what started ARC. The demand was so high. And God was stirring the leaders. A lot of these, we didn't even know, these weren't our leaders.
Right.
One of the misnomers about ARC is that we are a network of churches, which we're really not. We're a subcontractor. We're a church planting. We help you develop the product, and it's your product. We don't govern our churches. We're not a denomination, right? And so, but we felt like we had found a formula. We found, hey, make sure you do these 8 things if you want to have a successful launch. And really, the 2000s has been a church planting season.
It has been.
And it's important because we were losing churches at the rate of about 3,000 a year in America. And I think it was stirred by the Spirit of God, so that we don't turn into a Europe, where
right.
you can't even find a good life-giving church. And so it's still the joy of our lives to share what we know about church launching and church planting to as many leaders as we can. We even serve a bunch of denominations kind of as they're, again, a subcontractor. We'll go in and show you how to do it. And And I don't even know how long it'll last. As long as it's working and the demand is there. And but it's really been the joy of our life. Jesus said, "I will build my church." Mm-hmm. So every time we launch one, it just kind of feels like we're doing what Jesus would want us to do. It's what he's all about, is to build the church. So we're just church builders.
So with ARC, you obviously saw some trends. You met the demand. You knew that there was something there that you needed to pay attention to. What do you see on the horizon as the trends that we need to be paying attention to now in the local church context, especially with young adults?
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of it goes back to our conversation we just had about being a bit more direct and calling them to true theology, not a deconstructed theology, not a deconstructed mindset. And I don't know that we're going to see the popularity of church like we did over the past 20 years. And I think we have to prepare ourselves maybe even for a season of persecution, mm-hmm. which every generation of the church since the book of Acts has experienced. They've experienced both explosive growth and persecution. And I don't know that we've really prepared our churches for that. I think there are some other wars coming our way, so to speak, on certain issues. And I think it's important for us to equip the church to do that. I think personal evangelism is going to become a premium. I read a study recently that 47% of Americans are never going to go to a church, ever. So we're only going to be able to reach about half of the people with the go to church strategy, which has been our strategy, honestly, for the past 20 years. Let's build great churches, life-giving churches, and people were loving to come, and that, and a lot of people still are. But what about these other, 47% that are never going to dawn the door of a church? We'll have to teach our members how to be, how to share their faith and be successful with personal evangelism. So those are some of the things that are on my heart.
Yeah, I think that's a big shift, because I think you're right. The shift was like, invite your friend, bring him to the seat in the house, and they'll get saved. But this is, if you're saying 47% of people will never go to a church, which means they'll probably never stream a church or any of those things that we think are going to work, we're going to have to do the one-on-one work of personal evangelism, which is not something we talk about a lot anymore in church.
The building of the secular saint. I mean, that's
as Edison
marketplace ministry or whatever. I mean, I think that's a critical piece.
We're totally in it's been an inviting culture. Hey, we have great coffee, we have great preaching, we have, which is fine. But that's not really the pattern or the model that you see in Scripture, where we were to be fishers of men, and we were to be, the very last words out of Jesus' mouth is Acts 1:8, be my witnesses in every place you go. So I think it is very, very important for us to focus on. I'm preparing a series of messages right now for this summer, just to train our people in marketplace evangelism, marketplace ministry, because I think it's key.
That was what I was going to ask. How are you shifting how you lead with that, knowing this information? Then how do you shift how you lead? Obviously, the sermon series. Are you developing groups that are going to help people, or how are you going to kind of get ahead of this? Maybe not even ahead of it, but maybe catch up to it.
Yeah, and find people that already do it well. So probably the number one evangelist that I know of in America who does not preach on any church stage is John Maxwell. The man will go into secular companies, and at the end of his leadership teaching all day will say, and by the way, everything I learned about leadership, I learned out of the Bible. I'm going to dismiss. And of course, he has to get the permission from the company to do this. Most of them give him permission. He'll say, we're going to dismiss. And if you'd like to stay for an additional 15 minutes, I'm going to share my faith. And half will stay for the extra 15 minutes, and almost 100% of them give their life to Jesus in these secular companies. So I'm learning a lot from him, and I'm going to actually even I was on the phone with him yesterday saying, hey, I want a mentoring session for you to give me some nuggets so that when I teach this, I do it with someone who already does it extremely well.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's awesome. So much good stuff.
I know. Do you have 3 or 4 more hours? That's the next thing.
But his assistant's probably going to be texting me pretty soon and being like, Pastor Chris has other appointments.
Yeah. No, for sure. Hey, we have loved having you on the show. I do wish we had more time, and we appreciate so much your wisdom and the grace that you've given us today, just, kind of engaging with us. We do have one final question that we ask all the guests on our show, and it's, what is one lesson that you learned in college that did not take place in the classroom?
I learned all of my disciplines in college that did not take place in the classroom. I learned, that's where I learned to devote my mornings to God. That's when I started fasting. I did my first fast when I was 19 years old. I learned my spiritual disciplines in my college years, and I'll be 59 this year, and
wow,
and they have stuck with me all these years. And I was actually talking to someone about it. I look back, and that's where they all came from. And it's because I was around guys, honestly, and I'm not saying this to float your boat. I was around guys like you who were mentoring, having a Friday mentoring session, and I was listening, and it worked, and it stuck. That's awesome. So thank you guys for doing what you guys do, because it really does work. It impacted my life in a huge.
That's awesome. That's encouraging to us as we spend time, have our calendar full of students that we're going to meet with. So, Pastor Chris, from everybody in the church world, thank you. Because if you go to a church that has next steps, Pastor Chris had influence on that. Yeah. So our growth track or whatever it is, Highlands and Pastor Chris and their environment has just influenced so much of the kingdom and has shaped so many people. And so from everybody in the church world, I want to say thank you, not just for this time, but for your impact in the kingdom. What I love about you, and I want to take time to say this, is you are so humble in your leadership. Like, most people don't even know who he is outside of church leaders, but he's leading an exceptionally large church, a great organization, and it's all about the kingdom. It's never about him. And we appreciate that and that about you. And we are so thankful for your time. And as we always say here at the Leadership Drip, you always have a seat at the table. Thanks for taking time with us.
I enjoyed it very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Pastor Chris. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leadership Drip. If something from this episode was helpful for you, then share it on your social media and tag us. If we see it, we may share it on our channels. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and remember, you always have a seat at the table.